Awesome. Give me just a quick second. All right. So if you can't tell as of now, the presentation is going to be on PHP Object Injection. It's kind of a fun topic, especially for me, just because a lot of our code is written in PHP. So this is a very, very popular vulnerability that didn't get as much attention back in the day, and now is getting a little bit more because of some unique attacks that kind of came out through, like Black Hat 18 had a really neat one. That one's, I'm not going to go into depth with, but I did throw in some references for you guys at the end to kind of look at. And I can share out the PDF if you guys are interested afterwards. So, I am Jeremy Galindo. Some of you guys probably saw me over at the ISTS this past weekend, hanging out with Marshall. I'm one of the security engineers slash penetration testers at Datto, and been doing it for only about 6 months at Datto. A lot of hobby stuff since I was a kid, about 16 years old. So been coding and hacking since then, and finally made a profession. So Linux, Python, biggest things for me, just love them. Linux system security. I do a lot of CTFs as well. So whenever like new ones kind of come out, I'm always trying to learn new techniques by exploiting those things. And PHP and binary exploitation are probably my favorite subjects when it comes to, I guess, just hacking in general. So let's go over what's going to be covered today. So we're going to look into just general injection techniques. We're going to start pretty much from the bottom and work our way up to what I have. We're going to look into PHP serialization and magic methods and why they're kind of important. Then we'll dig into PHP Object Injection. I have a demo, actually kind of 2 demos that'll just kind of show a quick look at how it works, the attack vector. Then we'll talk about gadgets within some frameworks, popular PHP frameworks. Then a utility called PHP GGC, which is really awesome, but for some reason broke when I updated Kali earlier this morning. So yeah, we're gonna look at it, but I couldn't get some of the I guess gadgets to work properly. So then we'll look at mitigation. How do you kind of prevent these attacks? And then some references, and then we'll do a QA at the end. So start off right at the beginning. So what is an injection, right? There's tons of different kinds. We have pretty much, the attack is when some sort of application allows you to send untrusted data to an interpreter or a parser. So something that allows you to basically like take some malicious data that you want to use and turn it into something very, very fun, like an RCE or something, you know, or even SQL injection. So got a few different types at the bottom. SQL injection is probably really popular amongst everybody familiar with that attack. There's code injection. Cross-site scripting is also a sort of injection technique. You have XML injection, like external entity attacks, and then just in general PHP injection, like local file inclusion and stuff like that. So here's kind of one of the pieces that's like the heart of this type of attack. So it all comes down to serialization or deserialization. What this allows us to do is it allows us to basically transfer objects between either an object or a string, and kind of simplifies it so you can do things a lot faster than you would otherwise. So essentially what happens is a string is serialized, or sorry, an object is serialized to a string, and then we can write that string to a file or a database or wherever the heck you want to kind of store it. And then what we would eventually do is when we need to retrieve that object again, we run an unserialize on that and then turn it back into an object. There's a part of this that I'll explain at the end where like JSON encoding and decoding does allow you to pretty much like serialize objects, but then you only get a standard class back. So there's kind of like, I'll explain at the end, but there's pretty much 2 different ways that you can go about serialization, and that would be another way. So technically, deserializing data isn't always bad. Reason why is because If you have validated the input well enough, then you are more than okay most of the time to be able to take a large object or even just some strings instead of like PHP objects or something and deserialize them. So it's not always bad. But the user-controlled data is pretty much the dangerous part. So I know you guys have probably heard it plenty of times before, but you need to sanitize the input. If you don't sanitize the input, you are looking into some trouble. So we're going to just kind of show a few serialized examples really quick. These are just some basic ones. There's the PHP manual website that kind of shows you a few other ones, which kind of allow you to look at like what an object would look like if you serialize it. Integers basically just shows an I and then whatever integer that you kind of serialized. Strings, they're all prefaced by like pretty much what it is, like A for an array, S for a string, B for a Boolean, O for an object, so on and so forth. Here's part 2. This is the other extremely important part of the tech. So magic methods. In PHP and a few other languages actually have them. What it allows you to do is these magic methods are like special functions. So they start pretty much with like underscore underscore, some name, and then parentheses afterwards. And what it allows you to do essentially is it will run something automatically based on certain events on these objects that you're creating. So common ones are like wake up, sleep, destruct, there's construct, a bunch of other ones. I think there's at least 16 in the PHP world. But they're very, very important because you don't have to declare them. They may have their own certain type of, I guess, event that they're going to do on their method. But a lot of times, programmers will construct their own, I guess, magic methods, and it turns into really destructive behavior if they don't do something properly, such as sanitizing the input. The other unique thing is when you invoke unserialize, there's a few methods that actually get invoked right when you call unserialize, and is what kind of leads up to the primary part of the attack. So wake up, destruct as well, they're automatically executed. What that means essentially is when we unserialize this object, it now forces this object instantiation, and then we'll run that function for you. So we'll get into what it kind of looks like in a second when I do the demo, but it's really neat because you can literally control the entire flow of the program once you do that. You can do some really nasty stuff, and it's not just like a file get contents or something like that. There's pretty much anything that deals with files allows you to do any of these sort of like special attacks, eval statements as well. So let's talk about what a PHP object essentially is. I'm not sure if everybody deals with PHP or not, so I'm going to just kind of briefly go through it. But PHP objects, they're essentially defined by a class. So as you kind of see down at the bottom, you see the class creation is class, my class. You do a whole bunch of stuff inside there. You have some properties and whatnot, and then you end your class. And then when you want to create an object, those objects are actually just individual instances of a class. So now you can essentially do like create this new object by doing my object equals new my class, and then have a function within there or access some sort of properties that allow you to basically like grab information and assign it to other things. Boring stuff, I know. So this is what we want to see. Why are these important? Why do we want to be able to have these two things do something possibly malicious? So we'll go to a terminal really quick, and I'll show you some code. I'm not sure if you guys can see it in the back. Can everybody see the terminal in the back?
Make it a little bit bigger.
Yep. Anybody have any questions by any chance while I'm just kind of doing this really quick? All right, cool. Come on. That didn't do anything, so let's do terminator instead. All right, so this really does not want to get bigger. There we go. Much better? Yeah. All right, cool, cool. All right, so we have a few different files in here. We're going to take a quick look at demo1.php. And essentially, all it is a class that is created. This class essentially is just some dangerous thing. It has one property that says I'm safe. And it has this special function that does something once you destroy an object. And what it's supposed to do is echo that dangerous property with some new line, and it takes direct user input from the command line, and then we're going to unserialize it. So what you would expect to happen if you do something is that when you destroy the object, it would just say, I'm safe, right? That's what you would hope for. The beauty behind when you have this no sanitizing of the input is this string essentially right here. So I'm going to briefly explain what it does. This O, like I was saying earlier, essentially is an object string, so to speak. It takes a PHP object, turns it into this long string, and then has a whole bunch of different variables with it. So what we're going to do is create a new object. It has one essentially variable that we're going to be using with it, with a string of length 13, which is directly related to this dangerous prop that we're going to access. And what we're going to actually do is, with this object injection, is force it to say, I'm not safe instead. So you can only imagine if it wasn't just an echoing. I mean, you could still do stored XSS and stuff like that if it was a web page. But what we can do instead is if we run it this way, it says I'm not safe. It should not be that way, right? It should say I'm safe once we destroy the object. What's terrible behind it is, like I said, you can get remote code execution and other things like that, or retrieve the etc password file and stuff like that if you end up doing something of that sort, if there was a file get contents instead. So let's look at demo 2, which actually is going to briefly go over that. We have the same type of thing. We have a class that takes some sort of dangerous object, or that is called dangerous object. And instead, we're going to work on a file instead. So this file should be demo2, and we're going to read that file. And what it's going to do essentially is a file get contents on whatever this dangerous file is. But the attack vector essentially allows us to create our specific file that we want to access, and then pull whatever that data is. So if you were attempting to go to some server and you find this awesome type of attack because you have, I guess, source code access, or you can read the source code, and you find something like this where there's a file get contents, and maybe it doesn't have specifically that it's accessing this dangerous file, but maybe it has something where you can control part of the string. Then what this allows us to do is read a file. So I'll start off with this one. If we just cat demo2, that's essentially what it says in it, right? So PHP demo2. If we run that, it reads the file, demo2, right? That's kind of cool. But what if we wanted to change that and literally just access etc password? Or if it wasn't running under www data or something else, then maybe we could read that etc shadow or some other I guess sensitive files that would be really beneficial. So if you run that, of course now it's going to break because I didn't change it. Now we have everything, right? That's kind of great, right? We can look at some pretty cool stuff there. You read that etc password, now you can go ahead and start to grab some information for the users, or maybe there's some other files that you want to read that are kind of essential for you. So like if you're attacking like a Redis database, or if you're attacking some sort of other PHP files that you want to pretty much like pull information from, then you can do that. So pretty neat, pretty neat. We'll go back to the slide, wherever you are hiding. And this is where the juicy stuff comes in. So now we're going to pass the old school world of PHP, where everybody writes everything manually, and they try to implement sessions on their own and do all this other boring stuff. PHP frameworks are pretty much like the life now. Everybody does them. Everybody implements them of some sort, and there's an easy way to do it all, and it's called Composer. Composer is like a dependency thing that takes a whole bunch of like packages and stuff like that, puts them together, bundles it all in this nice little place for you, and all you have to do is include this one file that literally will auto-load everything on your system. Great, right? Developers probably love it. They don't have to do a whole bunch of work. Some of these things are called like Laravel, Symfony. Everybody knows Drupal. I don't know if you saw that remote code execution attack like last week, but it's pretty much one click, you're done. Guzzle, Monologue, just a whole bunch of different things. They're pretty important though, because a lot of different places use them. I won't say anything about Datto, but maybe we use some stuff like that as well. And what it allows us to do, and the fun part behind it, is that there's this thing called pop gadgets. So I'm sure everybody's familiar with like return-oriented programming. Anybody not familiar? Or looks like we're good? Okay, cool. So essentially it's the same type of attack, except for it's with like PHP objects and stuff like that. So it's called property-oriented programming. What it allows you to do is the same type of attack. You get to reuse available code segments within code that when you join them together, you can construct pretty much like this attack chain. And with these multiple gadgets put together, you can essentially help yourself get remote code execution. I mean, that's what we all want. We want root on the boxes somewhere or another. So thanks to this Composer add-on, what it allows us to do is takes that autoload.php file that's always added to a project and simplifies like loading of the frameworks. And the good part behind it is that somebody wrote a tool that they found a whole bunch of gadgets with and put it into this universal tool for all of us to use, which is called PHP GGC. So with this tool, what you get to do is you construct all these payloads and basically do like a one-click type of thing. Like it'll go, you create the file, say I want to use this particular RCE or this type of file write, and as long as you see unserialized for the most part within code, and one of those like frameworks like Guzzle or Symfony or something like that are there, what it'll allow you to do is it will run these, the object instantiation for you and essentially destruct the object and run whatever command you're trying to look for. So like maybe you're just trying to find out PHP info or something, or you need to find out, can I read a file on the system? Can I create a netcat listener? Can I basically just get remote shell access some way by running one of these RCEs for it? So most of them are remote code execution, luckily. And the code is on GitHub. I have it in the references section for you guys, so you can see it in a few. And you can also commit gadgets if you start to find some of them. So we're going to kind of look at it really quickly. I wish it was working like it was earlier, but it isn't. So what I'm going to show you guys is this utility. So there's two different kinds essentially. There's var GGC and then there's PHP GGC. Let me make that bigger for you guys. What var GGC essentially allows you to do is create a var file, which is just like a compiled PHP executable, and you can attach an object payload within the var file, and once that's done, you can essentially look for that unserialized or possibly even look for like the var wrapper, which there's like PHP input, there's the var wrapper, there's like this gzip wrapper and stuff like that. What it'll allow you to do is take that code and execute it. So I'll show you what one of the payloads looks like. The person that wrote this really went into really great depth, and it would probably take me about an hour to kind of explain it. So I'm going to leave that up to you guys to do a little bit of side research and look into it a little bit. But we'll take a look at this PHP GGC file. And these are, it's pretty simple, at least for what it shows right now. But what it does is you can set a wrapper, you can do a whole bunch of URL encoding on the payloads if you're trying to send it through like a, like a GET request or a POST request. And it has down at the bottom like all these different like types of examples that you can look forward to. So Laravel RC1 allows you to essentially execute code. Then there's the SwiftMailer file array, which essentially allows you to take whatever your shell is and directly write it to the file system. So if you have a way to do a local file inclusion or remote file inclusion, you can now include that in there and then be able to get your own shell by just accessing the page. So here's some of the I guess like exploits that it has within it. And one of the most popular ones that I've noticed besides Symfony is I see a lot of guzzle and I see a lot of monologue. There are just other types of frameworks. Symfony is like a huge thing where it allows you to like pretty much manage sessions and do a whole bunch of cool stuff and create cool pages with controllers and blah, blah, blah. Whatever, a lot of people like to use it essentially. So we're gonna go ahead and construct a payload really quick. So this RC1, let's say we want to do just like a PHP info and then just end it. It creates this really obnoxious like object at the bottom. But within this, I don't know if you guys can kind of see, but like it's got this PSR7 FN stream thing and whatever, all this other stuff. Essentially, it's a gadget within Guzzle that is found in this particular vulnerable version that allows you to run this code, execute it, and once it does the unserializing of this data, it essentially executes it right away for you. And so now you have some sort of RCE that's going to go ahead and run PHP info. Like I kind of said earlier, it sucks because I updated Kali and it stopped working for me this morning. So I guess we won't get to see the RCE demo that I was going to show you guys. But it's a really neat attack. You guys got to check it out. Once you kind of like run your own test code or even just like create your own code just to see how it works, you're going to be amazed. It's pretty freaking neat. So you will have to use like Composer and download some like the vulnerable versions and whatnot, but it's really neat. So very prevalent. How do we fix this? How do we get around this? Because serializing of data is really essential. It's fast. A lot of people want to take like these huge nested objects, like huge JSON objects or whatever, or try to figure out how can I create this nested object, PHP object that has a whole bunch of different stuff underneath it. How do I do this securely? So big thing is we don't want you to use serialized and unserialized functions if possible. Reason why is because of this particular attack, it's literally built into PHP. So until they fix that within PHP, there's no way for us to pretty much like get around it. So as a blue team member, you're kind of SOL, I guess. But as a red team member and a hacker, this is like your gold mine right here. You can pretty much just search for unserialized within code. And the second you find that, see if you have any way to write to this data. If you have a way to write to this, this data that'll eventually get unserialized, you now possibly have a good avenue of remote code execution. The other thing is there might actually be gadgets inside of the code itself. So if somebody creates like, I guess creates like their own objects for like, some class that they're creating for accessing or creating like authentication between different parts of their website and whatnot. They might be creating their own like destruct methods, magic methods, or their construct methods. And what it'll allow them to do is you can find gadgets within their code that has nothing to do with just PHP or anything else. You can literally create something from their own code to attack them. So it's really, really neat. What we would suggest, though, instead is try to use JSON. It's a lot more secure. There's so many more, I guess, less insecure methods within JSON that doesn't store objects directly. It stores them as what's called like STD class, a standard class, and you can't like unserialize that object and pull back an object to then get executed. So it's a lot more portable. It can be faster than serialized in most scenarios. There were a few tests that were run on like PHP 7.1 that kind of showed that it didn't run faster in some scenarios, especially on like really, really large objects. Sometimes PHP serialized function runs actually faster. And the big one is sanitize all user supply data. That's the biggest thing you can do. If you're going to give a user some sort of access to write data to your code, or within your code, or to a specific object, or whatever it may be, you need to make sure that they can't write something that they're not supposed to be able to do. I guess you really can't stress it enough. It's the worst part. You want to have something dynamic, but it can't always be that dynamic if you're going to, I guess, kind of leave this window open for somebody else. I left a bunch of different references here for you guys for some white papers that are phenomenal. This top one is the latest one from Black Hat 18. This guy goes over the file, basically like the FAR wrapper and how you can execute those FAR payloads within like PHP executables and stuff. Underneath it is that PHP tool, that PHP GGC. There's a few other ones. I think the third link, the Insomnia Sec one, was written a long time ago, but it was really neat, and it just kind of like started the trend of this type of attack. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of other stuff on there. You guys can probably search as well from other things, but that is the end. Anybody interested or have any questions or curious? In the back? Yeah, it's pretty much just like Pickle. Exact same scenario where you basically take something from pickled output and deserialize it, and now all of a sudden you have yourself code execution in some way. Java deserialization is the exact same scenario. There's one called like YSO serial, which does the same type of attack, except for Java. A lot of people aren't too familiar with serialization attacks, or they don't really think about it as a thing. But it really is a neat subject, and a lot of people don't really try to mitigate it right off the bat. So definitely something important to look into. Most people look for like SQL injection and stuff. So that's what it is. Yep. Awesome. Thank you. Yep.
Do you think this is going to be in like insecure deserialization? It's going to be on OWASP top 10 again?
I can almost guarantee. I monitor OS top 10 pretty much every single year as well, and try to see like what different types of methods that new attackers are coming out with, or what is the most popular thing for the year. As of 2017, no, sorry, it was 2018. I think this attack ranked 4th for PHP object injection. There were a few other techniques that were out there, but this is definitely like, it's definitely something that should be watched out for. So, anybody else? Nick?
In some other like web languages, they have things like type coercion with deserialization. Is there anything similar that you see for like PHP? Because I know like hack, which is something that's sometimes compared to PHP, they have like a type coercion that you can do with your serialization.
Not from what I know of. There could be, but I haven't really researched into that attack, so I definitely couldn't tell you that. But I mean, you have like type confusion attacks and stuff like that, but those are in something that, I mean, you won't really find that in PHP at least too much, just because types are pretty much standard. So yeah. Anyone else? All right. Well, feel free to, I got some swag at the back over there, actually at the front. I got some koozies, some privacy protectors, some pens. Trying to think what else. I think I got brochures there, but who really cares about those? And lots of stickers. So feel free to grab them. If you guys ever want to talk, feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, I'll share this out as well. So if you guys ever want to look at it, you're more than welcome to. So thanks.